Welcome, welcome again. This is Chala Dinkoy. I am the CEO and founder of the Repositioning Expert. I am going to go ahead and for the last time, as I say, I'm going to share. And what I wanted to, so what we're talking about today is the 5 closing mistakes that prolong the selling cycle. And we have about 45 minutes, but I'm here for the hour. So if you have any questions or if it runs over, feel free to stay. I have a book to tease you to stick around until the end. It's called Gentle Marketing, and I will give you the URL to download that and all the things that we're going to be talking about today. And you're in the right place if this is what you're experiencing. You finally get the meeting with the buyer for the contract of your life. But, and by the way, could you, if you could all mute yourselves, I can hear some noise and popping in the background. So the senior decision makers flake out at the last minute, or you do the and they love it and say they'll get back to you, but you never hear from them. It's like crickets. And or things are moving along great, but it's taking forever to move very, very slow. So here's my story of how I came up with everything that I teach you is I was actually in the trenches. I was actually on the buying side. I worked for all these large companies for 18 years. And I remember a story where a vendor actually wrote me a hate mail because it took so long for us to get back to them. And this is where, you know, the birth of this, the birth of the topic is how long do you have to wait before you send a hate mail to the person that you're trying to sell to? And the reason was, there was a lot of reasons, but my boss kept delaying the decision. And why did she keep delaying the decision? Because she kept changing her mind. We were already meeting with lots of other vendors. We liked someone else and we were negotiating with them, but we couldn't make the final decision to say no to everybody else at the time. We were keeping that first vendor who wrote me the hate mail as backup. And when she followed up, I kept saying, oh, you know, like my boss is out of town or we're still talking to people. So I just kept appeasing her. And she did go away. My boss did go away on business a lot. And she was doing, you know, delaying everything further. And then I got the hate mail. So that taught me, you know, like now I've been the seller. I'm on the other side of the table for 10 years. I've been the repositioning expert. And that's what I'm doing is now I teach businesses how to avoid all the pitfalls in a sales meeting that cause this kind of delay. I get all the right people to show up to the meeting. I build authority, or I help people build authority in the jaded eyes. I call it the jaded eyes of the because I mean, they have seen it all, they've done it all. They're just so tired, right? They just want to hear something different. And then I teach them how to close the sale faster. And I found myself doing this presentation to my actual existing clients over and over again to teach them stuff. So then I just thought, okay, I'm going to do a masterclass in the, you know, first couple of weeks of the year so that I can help other businesses that are in my networks, that are in my list, who have seen me speak. Some of you have worked with me, to remind you of some of the things that maybe we talked about or that you didn't know that you need to be doing to be closing the sale much faster. Now, what have my own closing results brought me? I work only half the day, half the week, making 3 times my corporate income, now 4 times. I spend tons of time with, I have Logan's on the spectrum. For the first time ever, I took him to Seattle for a VIP day with a client. And it turns out that they also had a kid on the spectrum. He was a little bit older, and we all got together for dinner. It was so nice. It's so nice to have your own business. It's so nice to work with. I pick and choose the people that I work with. It's just, they're lovely. I mean, I love the people that I work with. And then I help people fulfill their own dreams and live amazing lives. It feels so good to help them, close. Like a client just last month, it was her first business and she closed 60,000 in 60 days working together. And her life has changed. So here is, talking about hate mail, by contrast to the hate mail story, this is what I got. And I think you guys saw this in the email that I sent to invite you, but this is Michael, and he wrote me, like, he actually got this check and he wrote this email with the picture. I've never gotten a picture like that. So I always talk about it and I always use it, and I have his permission. And we also did a testimonial video afterwards where he talked about this experience. So he said, let's recap. Sales call this past Monday, same day sale, check arrives from BC 3 days later, entire year paid in full. So that's what I wanted to, so this illustrates a couple of things. Is I no longer get hate mail. I get love mails, thank God. And how it illustrates everything that I'm teaching you, I taught him. Everything that I'm going to tell you. Of course, I worked with him for a year program, but in this, you know, I will give you as much as I can give you in 45 minutes. So based on that, what we'll cover today is how to get the right meeting with the right people in the first place. And then how do you position your company? Remember that I'm the repositioning expert, so that the key decision makers do not flake out on you at the last minute. And what specific things do you need in the meeting to uncover their urgency? And then the single most important reason why your buyers will want to schedule the next meeting with you. And how do you do that before leaving? And then, of course, how do you have a no-fail guaranteed way to have a budget discussion? Because remember, I don't know if you knew this, but I do something called Tuesday Tea Time with Chala, and I often talk about new research that you know, I look up for each of the content topics for each week, because I have to do a content topic each Tuesday. And meetings where budget and cost are discussed in the first meeting of a sales meeting, they close 15% faster. So I want you to keep that number in your mind. And it's part of what I teach as a part of the process of selling. Okay, so what else are we going to cover? We're going to cover creating a powerful marketing materials that make it quicker, know how to respond when they say they need to think about it. And after, you know, this masterclass, you'll no longer waste time on long lead cycles. You'll get in the door to see the buyers before the RFP. And I have a whole RFP training. So the whole thing about RFPs is, in most RFPs, you're not even allowed to talk to, you know, the company that's issuing the RFP at the time. So it's so critical for you to get in between the RFP cycles, midway or a little bit, a third of the way of the contract cycle, to actually go in and talk to them about what is not working out with their current incumbent, so that you can build that into the RFP. These are all the skills that I'm going to talk to you about what to do in those meetings. Okay. After this masterclass, you'll have a competitive edge no matter how expensive you are. And I want you to be expensive. My clients hire me because they don't want to be the cheapest in their industry, because I'm not the cheapest in my industry, because there is a huge advantage from every kind of standpoint that you can think of to be more expensive than your competitors and still have a competitive edge. And then, of course, hopefully after this, you'll reduce the stress and take the load off your back, because now you'll know what to say in these meetings and close them faster. So imagine a world where buyers are asking for the next meeting and not the other way around. Like, you're not chasing them and chasing them. Imagine a world where, just like Michael, you know, you walk out with a PO and you're paid in half the time it usually takes. You have a rinse and repeat formula to make it happen over and over again. So what is the problem? Well, it's just long cycles. 52%, and this is a new number, just after COVID, of B2B executives report longer lead times to close a sale. And it takes on average over 3 months to close an average deal, but a quarter take longer than 6 months. And then 82% of companies like us go bankrupt because of the lack of cash flow. So I would say that this is a killer problem. These long cycles are killing companies. So why is it so long? So for new purchases, 50% of buyers will involve 4 or more people. So the buying teams are becoming committees. Buyers are becoming teams, are becoming committees. And even if you've done work with them, 74% will involve at least 3 people. And then buying group size has increased 20% versus pre-pandemic. And almost 80% won't call the rep until they've defined their needs fully. So that actually puts the onus on marketing, a lot more than it used to. So why is it, taking so long? Well, they're scared. The buyers are scared to make a mistake. Half of them, when we ask, have you ever wanted to buy the solution but not spoken up? They said yes. Half of them said yes. And the reason is, if you look at the next chart, it's because they're afraid of losing their job or losing face, respectability, respect, and credibility. And if you look at the size of the buying team, the higher it goes, the more they're afraid. The higher number it goes. So why is it a problem? It's because, well, wasted marketing budgets cost companies minimum $1 trillion a year, and B2B sellers waste on average over $38,000 per year in direct costs on meetings that go nowhere. These are all like specific content that I've done based on each of this. They're all very interesting and deep topics, why it's all happening. And 62% of initial meetings don't go anywhere. They don't go to the next meeting. So how are you going to stop this? So the closing mistake number one, and let me just take a sip, is that you're in the wrong room. Okay, so what does it mean when you're in the wrong room? Is when you have very little relevant experience for the prospect, and you are targeting the wrong industry or interest group, and you don't even know it because you've never done the strategic work to figure out which industry is the best fit for what you have to offer. There's a mismatch between what you're offering and what the prospect needs. I've spoken to so many buyers that this has been the case, where they've actually allowed companies to come in. And usually these are companies that they have been, the door has been opened through some other means other than them trying to, prospect their way in. It's been opened through a diversity conference. It's been opened through a matchmaker. It's been opened through some form of, third party. So then they come in and it's like, whoa. So how do you stop that? So look at the guy eating the pie with, his whole face. That's because that's my metaphor for targeting everyone. Instead, I want you to pick an industry or interest group to specialize in, because remember, human beings only gather in large groups in two ways, either by industry or interest group. So instead of this poor guy trying to eat the whole pie at the same time, I don't want you to be that guy. I want you to slice it out. I want you to slice the market, which is the metaphor for the pie, into industries or interest groups and try to eat it one at a time. And then know them cold, know that industry cold, inside out. And tailor your presentation stories to them, tailor everything to them. Have your marketing plan around their world, right? So it takes an average of 5 to 7 brand impressions before someone will remember your brand. And so here's my model for a marketing plan. So the first kind is, I'll work with anyone and do everything, which is the square. And it's at the top, it's the who of who you target. So it could be lots of industries, lots of different kinds of size of companies. And then the bottom is whatever products or services you're selling. So literally you're throwing everything you sell at everyone you know. That's the hardest part, the hardest kind to market, which is the square. Then you move on to the next shape, which is the product or service specialist, which is like a Starbucks. Then you move on to the next shape, and you could be just the customer specific, which is like Chuck E. Cheese. They only target kids. And then the last one is the golden position, which is what I try to get my clients to, is we're trying to start by targeting one industry and one product or service to sell to them. Okay. Now, what do we do with the industry that we pick? Well, we put them in the middle of what we call the customer sun, which is the worldview of the target market. So if you were, let's say, a food and beverage CMO, chief marketing officer, what kind of publications would you be reading? What kind of associations, organizations would you be a member of? What kind of meetings, conferences, trade shows, and events would you be going to? What kind of other professionals would you be working with? What kind of other professionals who, are actually kind of competitors, who kind of do the same thing, but are a little bit different than the vendor who's trying to get to you, could you be introduced to? So the target market is in the middle, and then the marketing plan is everything you do around the sun. So the people, let me give you some examples to help you. I always tell stories of clients who got it right because it illustrates what you should be doing for your own business. So people who got in the right room, this was a client who who had a generic language school. She was competing with the likes of Berlitz. And when we did the research, we found out that she should be targeting mining companies because she had a lot of history with them, and she had there was a lot of ways that she could reach them. And the number one problem was that 67% of executives said that the language miscommunications led to inefficiencies that slowed down the productivity. And it turned out it was mostly cultural. So she started doing cultural language training for mining companies. Here's a company that was just a generic ad agency that we, positioned into being an inbound marketing agency for just food service manufacturers. And did it work? Well, here's an email that came from Andrea, who's the CEO, and she copied me on it and said that, she called the target, which was just a prospect that was cold, and spoke with their marketing director for food service. And at first he turned her down. But as soon as she said she specialized in his field, his ears perked up. He wouldn't stop talking. He was delighted to hear that they specialize in the food service industry, and they got the account. So specialization is really working. So this, again, was a generic leadership expert, insight coaching and consulting. And through the research, we niched them, made them an expert in decision-making, because it turned out that their clients who were manufacturers, small manufacturers, they had a lot of issues with managers making mistakes, which was slowing the production line. So the name of the company changed to problemsolvingleader.com, and the positioning statement became creating fearless decision makers. So closing mistake number 2 is the wrong people are in the room. So who are the 2 people who need to be in the room? And remember, there are committees. So these 2 people could represent 6. But the responsibility that they need to have is, one is the money guy, so the budget guy or gal, and the other is the decision. Who needs to be making the decision to hire you? So those 2 responsibilities have to be in the room. Who are the wrong people is everyone under them. So stop pitching to people who are not going to be able to make a decision. That's when you have the case of what happened with me with, the hate mail woman is, she's saying how I was so unprofessional for keeping her waiting for so long, and how I couldn't make a decision, and how it was so unfair. Well, that's because she didn't have all the right people in the room. Okay. Now, how do you get to them? Is you get the meeting directly from them because you're marketing directly to them. So if your marketing is speaking to I often talk about this. I have a lot of clients who are trying to, for example, target HR. And in some instances, HR directors or managers do not have the direct authority. They're not one of the 2 people. And in that case, we have to go higher and we have to target CEOs. So that's just one example of, we have to be targeting and changing your marketing of where you speak, where you network, what you say, what problems you talk about, according to the actual decision maker. So the other way is you ask them, who else needs to be here in order for us to create this solution together, in order for us to talk about this very expensive problem that you have to ask them to be there. Okay. And what if you can't get them there? Well, have the meeting anyway, but don't talk about price. Get them to vet what you've got. And then I'll get to that at the end, but get them to vet what you've got to say, and get them to agree to the next meeting, that the next step is going to be to involve the next, the higher level decision makers. And do not send a price or a written proposal without having the next meeting with the decision makers. Do not talk about price. So, and these are all tactics to shorten the decision-making time, right? I'm trying to get you the best case scenario. Obviously, you're going to go and do things that are outside of this, but in my experience, they will prolong the decision, they will prevent the decision, and you will most likely lose out. But if you can stand behind and, have what we call, the balls to be able to demand that the right people are in the room, refuse to talk about price, refuse to send them the proposal unless the right people are being addressed, then, if you can do that, then you stand a much better chance of not just closing, but closing much faster. And book the next meeting with them involved if you can't get them. So let's say you went through, the meeting and the decision makers weren't there, but maybe the influencers were there. Then you say, okay, so the next natural step for us is to have the decision makers in the room, to involve them in the creation of the scope of work, the co-creation of the scope of work. And if they still refuse it, I would refuse to send in a proposal to them, because if they like what they see enough, they will get the higher levels to come in. If they have enough of a pain and an interest, and if there's enough urgency, they will not say no. I've never seen that. So how to prevent the higher levels from flaking out? So what I've seen is, one, if you have enough, well, we'll talk about this, but if you have enough equity as a person, as a consultant, or as a company, or as a brand, they don't flake out. The other thing is, if there's enough pain, they don't flake out. Like, they will carve out the 90 minutes or whatever it is that you need. But one of the things that you can do once it's booked and they're agreed to come is reach out personally to talk about the meeting. And through either, you could do through LinkedIn or through email, or CC when appropriate. So involve them in conversations talking about the upcoming meeting that they're involved in. And then in the meantime, you can email relevant news topics that come up in the media to the decision makers prior to the meeting, to keep you top of mind, to keep the pain top of mind, to tell them that you're an expert in that industry, in that solution. Just keep flirting with them. And then offer to take in lunch during the meeting, bringing the top decision makers' favorite food. I have not been below doing this. I have done this, right? And it has worked beautifully. I used to do this all the time before COVID. And, right now, a lot more buyers are doing phone and Zoom, not phone, but Zoom. And a lot of them want to do it that way. So you could also still do that, send it to them through Uber Eats or whatever it is, and still make sure that they show up to the Zoom. And then offer to bring in some sort of industry trend data or lookbook or presentation or prototype, something that has to do not just with you and your selling, but something that is of value to them, so that they won't flake out, because it's going to be interesting. There's an added interest. So closing mistake number 3 is when you're just like everybody else. Because remember when I said nobody, if you've got enough of equity, if you've got enough of a name, well, nobody cancels a meeting with Sheryl Sandberg, right? She's the CEO of Facebook, and nobody would ever cancel. And she's a celebrity because she wrote that book, Lean In. So how do you Sheryl Sandberg yourself? Well, get into that sun that I was talking about over and over again. When they see you, they're going to associate you with the solution that you bring. Over and over again with your messaging, with your, if you have, you become a podcast guest in their world, you do LinkedIn lives like I do, you take, place, you're like a keynote in their speaking circles, in their associations, in their meetings, whatever it is, get into that prospect sun at least 5 to 7 times, right? Now, produce content that's visible. So as I was telling you, I'm doing this, so you guys see me one more time, rather than just reading my emails. I do podcasts. I do the Tuesday tea time. I speak, I keynote, I coach, but it's all visible. And I use it in my marketing. I'm not, I use that as content and collateral, because then when somebody Googles me, they can find a ton of information about exactly what I do and the problem. I'm hearing some background noise. Sorry.
I'm sort of in a meeting. I'm in a class.
Can you mute yourselves, guys?
Yeah.
All right. Can you mute yourselves? I don't know who is not muted. This person's not muted. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. All right. I am going back to the presentation. Okay. So create events that allow you to be the celebrity. So that's what I mean. If you're running, so for example, we're going to be running executive roundtables at the upcoming WeBank conference in Nashville in March. So, for example, I have a sponsor who has been sponsoring me. It's Capital One. And the 21st, which is the day before registration, or is the day of registration, what we have is just before the actual conference actually starts, we have 15 CEOs coming together to talk about business development. And I'll be leading that. And Capital One and I will be leading that. So I'm the celebrity in that event. Like, I'm not a real celebrity, but that is an event. Now, everybody who is invited, even if they can't make it, are going to know my name. They're going to know that I am running an event that talks about business development, and that's going to increase my credibility. So if I invite a woman, a CEO of $5 million company, a woman CEO who's a WeBank member, then she's going to know my name the next time that I call her. And then you create your own reputation that way. A lot of you have met me through that kind of, exposure and visibility. So that's what I want for you. So then once you get into your target's market and you're visible all over the board, they're going to start to know you. The other way to get known is you send blogs. The executive roundtable that I talked to you about, it's really intimate groups of 8. We're doing 15 because it's a bigger group. We're going to facilitate a discussion around the persistent pain point, which is, how to generate additional funnels for multiple 6-figure funnels. It positions you as an expert in the solution. I've also done lots of conference coaching. You can do that. And the people that sign up may not be actual decision makers, but if you go to the right conferences, they are. And not only that, but you're positioned in the conference and like in all of the conference marketing, you're positioned as being an expert. Publishing, I now have 4. Speaking at conferences, I've done that. And so this is the one thing, like I talk to a lot of my clients about, is they are not visible on their website. So please get visible on your website. This woman, Sleep Country is one of the largest bed companies in Canada. And it's multi-million-dollar company, and they have other partners, but she's the face. They even have cartoons with her. And then there's Marissa Meyer. She's the CEO of Yahoo, and she did a Vogue spread, for God's sake, right? And she's in one of the most male-dominated. Get on TV. Like, I do a lot of TV, and it's not that anybody's up at 7 o'clock to watch, Albuquerque, New Mexico, but I leverage it. I use it. And then please be on your company's about page if you're and the owner, and then be visible on your collateral content. So this is one of my beloved clients, former clients, and she couldn't be here today, so she asked us to send her the replay. But she put herself on her collateral, on her tip sheet, and of course, be visible on your newsletters, and do webinars like master classes like this. So that's what I want you to be, as visible. So that's the mistake you're making. Closing mistake number 4 is you're saying the wrong things in the meeting. So I want you to have self-amnesia. Stop talking about yourself, your culture, your mission, your staff, the number of offices, number of years, and awards. It's not relevant to them. You can talk about it within context of your, size or scope, but it's only within the context of how you help others. Talk about you only in the context of the solution, because 70% of people make a purchasing decision to solve a problem, right? No pain, no sale. Only 30% to improve something. So here's a client, we redid their website, for example. This is just a mock-up. They were a logistics company in New Orleans, and what the number one pain they solved was leaving product waiting on the dock costs $1 million a month for their clients. Here's another client we did. The number one problem she solved was 9 out of 10 food supply chain manufacturers were delayed in getting orders, national brand orders, because they didn't have the certification, and they were losing, $250,000 a year, and that's in Canada. So that would be 10 times the amount in the US. Here's a recent repositioning we did with a janitorial company. And the number one pain point of their clients in healthcare was continuity in cleaning services, like in elite cleaning services. because hospitals have to shut down their, cleaning areas. They have to shut down because of, inconsistent cleaning staff. They have to shut down everything. So their people don't leave them. They have 4 times more retention than the industry for the past 8 years running. So that became the positioning. So if you're not uncovering their urgency, that's another issue. So here's how to uncover it. My 5-step selling process, most of my clients know. The first is the vision. So what do they want? You have to ask them, what do they want with respect to what you do? Not what do they want in general, because they could say world peace and you can't help them. So what do they want with respect to why you're talking to them or what you do? The second is what has kept them from getting it? So the obstacle. The third is what is the cost of that obstacle? So what's it costing you? What is the consequence of not being able to get over that obstacle? And then what can you do to help? So I want you to summarize your process in 3 to 5 steps and say, first, we would start with doing this, then we do this, then we do this, lastly, we do this. So I want you to, instead of giving them an entire scope of work that they can go and take it to someone else, or they can think that they can do it themselves, I want you to give them the top lines of what you would do for them. And then the big question is this what you need? Would this help you? And once you ask them that, then they're either going to say yes or no. If it's a no, then you overcome the objection, because we've never even talked about the price. So then you overcome the objection within the scope of, within the process, and say, oh, we would change that process for you. And then if they say yes, then, and if all the decision makers are in the room, then you can go ahead and have the price discussion. Okay. So before we go to the follow-up, I want to talk to you about how do you have the price discussion? Well, if all the decision makers are in the room, you actually together co-create the solution by asking them specific questions on how you would build out the program. I like to whiteboard it or flip chart it in front of them. Or if that's not an option, if we're on Zoom, I open up a white page, and then I actually write down how we would work together. And by asking them what would be involved, how many people, how many months, how many locations, check in with what's been done before, format it the way that you would do any scope of work for that work. And then have in the back of your mind, before you go in there, how much a similar program would have cost, and give them a range. And the biggest question you need to ask is, so you've talked about, you would say it would cost about $100 and $150 to do this based on previous work that I've done. Which part of this are you willing to bite off right now? So that's the biggest question, is that's when they talk about the actual budget. Is they say, well, I think we would be able to bite off maybe half of that right now. So then you say, okay, we would start with this piece. Or if they say, whoa, cool your jets, we don't have 100,000, we have 10, then you would circle the part that you recommend starting with. And, or if they say, yes, this is kind of the budget that we have, or this is exactly what we were thinking, which has happened actually to a client in November. And we actually did a live with her. We did a Tuesday tea time with her, where she talked about this. She said the number, they said that's what we had in mind, and they closed the sale right there, first meeting. And she said, Chala, I did the 5-step selling process, and it's exactly what happened. So what you have to say at that time as well, does it make sense then for me to go back to the office and send you the PO and the agreement, and then we start the week after or the month after you agree to the next starting? Okay. So that's how that is done. So the closing mistake number 5, let me just take a sip. I'm just keeping my eye on the time. Okay, so you're a follow-up dud. What's the problem with follow-up is 56% of the people that you meet with are not actually ready to buy. And 80% of sales require 5 follow-up calls or touch points after the meeting. And then like almost half of reps or, owners, whoever's doing the outreach, is giving up after 1. So you can see that there's a lot of money being left on the table. So the biggest mistake that I see my clients making is not leaving with a date for the next meeting. And because it's a committee, they're overwhelmed. So one of the other things that you should know is that statistically, when you're meeting with committees, if you go in with more than one person selling, so if you bring in a team, so it's almost like teams against teams. but they're not like just puppets. They're not dry. They all have to talk about some form. They all have to do one part of the presentation, or they have to have some authority. There has to be a reason for them to be there. They can't just be henchmen coming in with you. But so from research, the number of people that go in when they match the number of buyers in that team is a higher close rate. So therefore it's a faster close rate. So again, what I was saying is, when you're leaving without a date, when they say, okay, well, send us something. First of all, now not to do that. You say, we don't send anything, we co-create it. And then we send you a contract. Once we've done the actual number, we've got an agreement on the range. But if they say something like, well, we don't know when all the dates are available for everyone, we don't know, there's too many people here, we don't know what's a good date, then you get a date to get a date and say, okay, great, I understand. So I'm going to call you next Monday at noon. And you talk to your contact person and you say that in front of the committee and say, will you all have one date, decided by then? And if they're serious about buying from you, they're serious about starting work together, they're serious about going to the next step, of course, they're going to say yes, right? So get a date to get the date. Don't leave without a date for the next meeting, because it is so hard to find these people, to pin them down. That's what's causing probably the number one lengthening reason. The number one reason why it takes so long is because you're not getting the date for the next meeting. Not having a CRM system or some system to track progress, because you leave one person at, like, we'll get back to you. And then you check in with them once or twice, and then you never hear from them. But if you don't have a system to track the progress, to actually check in with them systematically, or to escalate them or de-escalate them to a hot or a warm lead, you're not going to be able to really progress them. Because remember, it takes like 5 calls, but people are only doing the one. So you're not even going to be able to track, how many times did I call this person? When did I call them? What did I say? And not having a library of relevant content around the prospect's pain. Again, you have to have something to say about the pain. You have to have a positioning and a message. And I'm actually going to give you some resources around that. So the next one is not having a new event to invite them to. If you don't do things, you don't have to do them like I do at conferences. You don't have to do them in conjunction with conference organizers. You can do your own, like this one. Like right now, this one that I'm doing, we invited a lot of prospects to this event. It's an event. There's other events that you can invite them to that are standalones. They can be in person. They can be partnered up with other, vendors that they have that that they use, and so on. So if you don't have events, you can't invite them to. And then not putting them on your mailing list. So a lot of clients I have don't even have a mailing list when we start. And then that's one of the most important things. It's like your bread and butter. It's the place that you go back to over and over again to prospect, to inform, to support, and to build content, right? You have to go back to them. If you don't have a mailing list, if you're not building that with your business, like, you're not going to have much marketing to go to. You're not going to have anywhere to go to. And then, yeah, well, there you go. I said not having a mailing list. So those are some of the follow-up mistakes. And of course, if you don't have a steady way of sending relevant articles and contextual gifts from time to time. Contextual gifts are like within the context of their pain. So for example, the cleaning company where we came up with the positioning of their people don't leave them, what we came up with the contextual gift of a glue bottle, the iconic white glue bottle, and we're going to put a logo and the message, our people stick with us. And then on the back, it's going to say, what does that mean for you? Well, it means that you never have to close your, hospital rooms and your waiting rooms, because you'll always have continual LE cleaning services. So these kinds of things revive conversations, open doors, and they're relevant to what you do, to your positioning. So everything starts with what positioning you have and what messaging you have around that positioning. So the summary of the 5 closing mistakes are you're in the wrong room. So remember, you have to choose your industry, become an expert in that industry, know them inside out, so that you're never mismatched when you go to that, company, which is in the industry that you specialize in, because you know their problems, you speak their language, you've probably met them in all of the work that you've done, they've probably heard about you. So don't be in the wrong room. Don't be with the wrong people. Remember, you have to be with either the budget or the authority or a committee that includes both, but do not meet with people who do not pitch to anyone who cannot make the final decision on hiring you. Number 3 closing mistake is when you're just like everybody else and you have no differentiator, you have no positioning that's different than anybody else. Remember, 86% of buyers can't tell the difference between 2 suppliers that do the same thing. And when you're not visible and you're just blending in with everybody else. The 4th thing is your messaging, right? You're saying the wrong things in the meeting. So if you're not uncovering the urgency using questions, the questions that I gave you are all psychologically driven to figure out what is the pain, what is the pleasure, how do you position yourself as the expert that's going to take them from one to the other, what is the cost of not hiring you, what is the cost of ignoring this problem. These are, if you are not saying and asking these questions, then you're saying the wrong things in the meeting, and that's going to prolong your sale. And lastly, of course, you're a follow-up dud, which most people do not even do proper follow-up. But in order to do the proper follow-up, you have to have the right meeting. So you have to get the dates before you leave. You have to get agreement to the next step so that you don't have to keep calling over and over and over again. I've had clients who've hired me because they have an enormous list of people to follow up with because they are a follow-up dud because they did all the first 5 things wrong, or the first 4 things wrong. And that's why they're clueless about what to do to follow up. And then even when they do follow up with a kind of like a dead list, it doesn't go anywhere. It's in the heat of the moment when you meet people or when they have a need that you do the 5 things that I'm telling you here that you can close and close fast. Okay. So the next steps is I'm offering a complimentary closing jumpstart call. So I called it a closing jumpstart, and you can go to repositioner.com/schedule. So what we're going to do on this call is we're going to talk about your differentiator. I'm going to ask you some questions to figure out and try to understand your business, to figure out what could be your differentiated positioning, and then what could be the messaging that based on that differentiator that will open buyers' doors for you. And I'm happy to do that. And then if as a result of that discussion, you want to work together, that's a happy coincidence and it's wonderful. And it is no strings attached, but that's what we're going to talk about. So go ahead and schedule